I, Sheen Pandita from Sustainable Buildings at TERI, welcome all of you to today's session, Incentives for a Low Carbon Future. Now, I would like to start introducing our guests on the panel today. First, I'd like to introduce our chair, Dr. Dhruva Purasakta. He's the director at the Council of Energy, Environment and Water. Can we please have a round of applause for him? He has over 30 years of experience in international development, climate finance, and energy transition. He has held key roles at the World Bank, International Finance Corporation, and the ICRA. Prior to joining CEW, Dhruva served as the Indian Director for Climate Policy Initiative, focusing on climate and transition finance. He is also a visiting faculty member at IIM Calcutta and a guest faculty at IIM Ranchi, where he teaches climate finance and economics. Can you have another round of applause, please? Next on the panel, we have Mr. Saurabh Didi. He presently serves as the Director at the Bureau of Energy Efficiency within the Ministry of Power, New Delhi. With a strong commitment to advancing energy efficiency and sustainability, Mr. Saurabh played a pivotal role in standard and labeling program, reducing CO2 emissions by approximately 57 million tons. He has been at the forefront of groundbreaking initiatives such as development of India's carbon market and the formulation of the National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency, which has played a significant role in shaping the country's energy policies. Currently, he is actively involved in developing the Indian carbon market and overseeing various other programs, including those related to energy efficiency in the building and transport sectors. Next on the panel, I would like to introduce Ms. Neha Khanna. She is a green and sustainable finance expert with 14 years of financial advisory and risk consulting professional experience, working with multinational corporation banks, DFAs, foundations, and multilaterals in India, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Tanzania, and the United States. Neha's expertise includes financial risk management, strategy consulting, development consulting, financial inclusion, and climate-related financial risk, with a focus on banking, capital markets, and insurance. She delivers lectures and trainings on green finance and climate-related financial risks and opportunities to private and public financial experts. Neha is also a steering committee member of the Greening of Finance by Women Network, a member of the Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTI, Expert Advisory Group for Financial Institutions, Net Zero Standards, and acts as a subject matter expert for the CSR curriculum with GARP. Can you please have a round of applause, please? Next on the panel, I'll introduce Ms. Rachika Sahai. She's a partner at Argus Partners, where she leads the M&A and climate practice. She's a graduate of National Law Institute, University Bhopal. She also holds an LLM from the London Schools of Economics and Political Science. With nearly 20 years of experience, Rachika specializes in power, oil and gas, and mining sectors, as well as PPP projects for infrastructure, development, and transport. She has extensive experience in corporate transactions, including joint ventures, mergers, acquisitions, private equity, and foreign direct investments. Recognized as one of India's top 30 female lawyers, she's been listed in the Force Legal Power List and received several awards, including Rising Star by Legal Era. Next on the panel, I'll introduce, with a round of applause, Mr. Archit Batra. Archit brings over a decade of expertise in sustainability, strategy, business expansion, carbon innovation, and client engagement. He has worked extensively with state and national governments to conceptualize and scale climate change mitigation and adaptation projects. With a proven record in launching new verticals and integrating cutting-edge technologies, Archit specializes in building strategic partnerships, developing actionable business models, and delivering impactful climate solutions. His work focuses on enhancing carbon portfolios, strengthening community resilience, and driving initiatives that seamlessly bridge policy, technology, and business to achieve transformative long-term impact. Next on the panel, I hope with a round of applause, audience, please, we welcome Mr. Sandeep Sonegra, Managing Director, Orange County Group. With over 2 decades of experience in construction, notable projects include Orange County Phase 2, recognized in the Limca Book of Records for being the first multi-story residential building powered largely by solar energy, and Royal Orange County, India's first 5-star rated residential project. Currently, he is leading the development of Evo Green City at Gantharam, aiming to be India's first sustainable township. Their work is guided by Harit Ashtamarg philosophy of green construction with a focus on planting over 2 lakh trees. The Orange County Foundation supports eco-friendly construction research and its dissemination in society. Finally, on the panel, we have Mr. Zuhaib Siddiqui, General Manager, Architecture and Design, Whitelight Corporation. He's a distinguished architect and over 18 years of experience in architectural design, project management, and sustainable development. He's currently the Senior General Manager, Architecture and Design at Whitelight Corporation, where he spearheads the design and execution of large-scale, high-impact projects. His expertise lies in crafting innovation, functional, and sustainable architectural solutions that align with contemporary needs while adhering to global standards. His portfolio spans diverse sectors, including residential, commercial, and mixed-use developments, showcasing his ability to balance aesthetic excellence with technical precision. It's now my pleasure to hand over the stage to our esteemed chair, Dr. Dhruva, to kickstart the discussion with the panelists.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to sort of manage this session in some way. This is a very interesting kind of connection. To start with, I would first want to congratulate Terry and the Griha Council for the excellent job done over the last decade or more. My friend Sanjay is here. He can correct me, but at least I know the work that Griha Council has been doing for at least 10 years or more. And it's been really stellar to get these initiatives incorporated, green initiatives in the real estate sector even prior to COP or Paris Agreement came on to fray. Now, with this session, to just about start off this session, first is, I would like to say that we have an excellent group over here. You see what we have an architect who looks at architecture and looks at, views the problem from architecture. We have a real estate developer. We have somebody who is Mr. Saurav Diddi, right at the heart of BE, which essentially drives everything to do with energy efficiency in buildings. And then we have Neha in finance, and then we have finally law, which is critical in putting certain, at least any thoughts to action into implementation. So this is an excellent group of people combined across, but let me just add my 2 cents before I hand over the mic to my esteemed panelists, is to say, you know, this session is about accelerating climate action in built environment. And then the theme of this event is accelerating climate action, accelerating sustainability in built environment. And I would like to spend a couple of minutes in explaining as to why that is critically important. Is for India, you know, a lot of the final consumption is what? Is built environment. What do people end up considering what is development? When we go somewhere, we look at buildings, roads, bridges, infrastructure, and say this is great development ho raha hai. Now, this is what the driver is of what visible effects of development. And by the way, if I were to put India in perspective and Viksit Bharat in perspective, you know, 70% of India is yet to be built. So this is the driving action. If you drive green sustainability, climate action in built environment, but unfortunately the working groups will happen as finance, as industries, as power, as transport. I don't find working groups being put up by the government on built environment, which is like the cities, the all-inclusive. See, we tend to divide cities into, I'll do the roads, okay, this is buses, this is mobility, or this is, okay, this is lighting, this is electricity. Look at the city, and this is where built environment comes in. And this is where it is such critically important to look at this problem from the lens that has been placed in trying to look at built environment as a pivot or as the object around which we can build climate action, we can build sustainability, build a low carbon, greener future. Now let me spend 2 minutes on the incentives. Yeah, a lot of incentives have been mentioned, but incentives for what? At the end of the day, we need to understand that beyond a point, this is incentives for, either it is incentives for market behavior. If it is purely incentives for market behavior, I don't think we will succeed in a greener, low carbon future. Very clearly, it has to be incentives where market reflects societal behavior. Currently, we are in a situation where markets are for real, but it does not reflect societal behavior. And I'll end with a very small example, and then I'll get over to trying to get my panelists into this issue, because we are conditioned to understanding that anything today is valued much more than anything tomorrow. Now, therein lies the root of the problem, because for all of us as driven by policymakers, markets, stock markets, our own bosses, performance, HR, appraisals, everything is about short-termism, right? Everything is about short-term. And here you are trying to make a difference much on the longer term, not in our lifetime too. It is intergenerational. And let's understand, why do you do it? And when we look at money, it is said to be discounted at 15%, so that money 3 years later becomes insignificant to anybody looking at finance. How do you change that? Those are the incentives that are important. Green bonds, green credits, tax incentives is what is a way to direct, but I think the incentives need to be much more societally ingrained into values of society, which then get translated to markets. And that's a thinking which will necessarily have to be imbibed in the built environment construction, real estate development, the way we live. And that is exactly, Griha has all-encompassing quality of life focus. The way we live, the way we eat, way we travel, way we conduct ourselves, way we cook our food. And that change is the incentives for that which will make the difference. Somehow we are still not there, but I think over a period of time, policy, intergenerational considerations, understanding that future is for the next generation, and driving that and making it understand. Unfortunately, the political system also has to recognize that there is life beyond 5 years. So does the CEO of a private corporation recognize that there is something beyond the quarter-on-quarter stock market performance. And so does every change in every society needs to reflect these societal values, who then have to influence markets. After all, if we leave it to the markets, we are not going to get there. Sorry to end on a slightly difficult note, but this is what I would talk about: incentives of behavior, of practice, of responsible consumption, which will drive things. Thank you.
So, with these few words, let me, sir, start with Mr. Saurav Diddi. With you're at the center, while I think the organizations have shared a set of questions. Since you're at the sort of apex at Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which, by the way, has been immensely successful for the last decade in actually driving behavior and change in energy efficiency. Now you're carrying that forward to even somewhat monetizing it into incentives for low carbon future. For me, like, over to you as to how do you think this will shape up in the building sector? And feel free to add whatever you want.
Thank you. What you said actually is very correct, that our built environment is actually consuming everything, right from steel, cement, when we are talking about hard-to-abate sectors, transport, cars, everything, again taking steel. Even when we are talking about electricity, mostly we are in the built environment. So somehow everything is connected. And as of now, we are in the process of development of Indian carbon market, which will actually act as an incentive program for reducing the emissions of our country. And now, because you may note that I am from Bureau of Energy Efficiency and I am talking about emissions. But when we talk about energy, emission is inbuilt in that. But apart from that, if we have to look from the holistic point of view, then instead of energy, we have to look at the emissions overall. And when we talk about, for example, Griha, all the programs think about holistic view of building or built environment, not only from the energy perspective. So Indian carbon market also originated from this perspective that we have to reduce emission intensity of our country. Although I'll say emission intensity, not in terms of overall emissions, because we are growing and till 2035 or 40, our peaking will happen. So by that time, we may not reduce absolute emissions, but at least per unit of whatever we are consuming, we have to reduce. So Indian carbon market is in two shapes. One is on the compliance mechanism where we are giving targets to hard to abate sectors, for example, cement sector or steel sector, where we are going to give targets in terms of emission intensity, and they can reduce emissions maybe from the energy related emissions or process related emissions as well. And we have already formulated, for example, for cement or steel, we have already formulated strategy till 2030 that how much value they have to, or how much emission intensity they have to come down. For example, in case of steel, right now, if we look at emission intensity of steel in terms of crude steel is 2.54 tons of CO2 per ton of crude steel, which has to come down to 2.2 tons of CO2 per ton of crude steel. And we looked at marginal abatement cost curves, that how actually it will impact on overall cost of the steel. And this is astonishing to us that even if we will reduce to 2.2, there will be not marginal impact on the cost of the steel. Actually, 1 paisa cost will reduce rather than per kg of steel. 1 paisa per kg of steel will reduce rather than increasing. But at the same time, we had to have investment in the order of 50,000 to 60,000 crore rupees till 2030 for the steel sector itself. So you can imagine that how much investment will be required, but at the same time, how much emission we can reduce. It is different for different sectors. If we talk about aluminum cost is huge because mostly aluminum will deploy renewable energy, which is much more costlier than the energy efficiency aspects. So this is about the hard to abate sectors. Now, but if we look at from the general point of view, offset mechanism is the another mechanism which we are coming up and where anyone can be involved. For example, if you are a developer of a RE, you could be involved. If you are producing any material which is having a low embodied energy, still your projects can be registered in the carbon market under the offset mechanism. Only thing is we have to develop methodologies according to that. But you will say that these kind of programs are already there. For example, Vera, Gold Standard, all those things are there and nobody is registering such projects which are of small scale. Here, Government of India can play a significant role because we are not here for the profits. And the project cost, what we observed for the verification, validation, and all those things, project cost is huge. So if you will generate, say, 100,000 CERs or carbon credits, you may not be economically viable. But here, we have reduced that cost significantly that will make projects viable even of the smaller size. So that's how a lot of other people could be part of this. So in a way that everybody will be involved, right from the hard to abate sectors till the even small players of the electric mobility could be part of this, even green hydrogen producers or small RE developers or even waste minimization projects, everything could be covered under the offset mechanisms. That's how we are covered here.
No, thanks. This was great, Saurav. And just going on to just keeping track of time, I just request everyone to keep it to maybe 5 to 7 minutes, roughly, their first comments. So let me now come to Neha on finance. And yeah, domestic finance only. In terms of saying what we spoke about, finance has always been a problem, but feel free to address. But my specific question would be that when built environment is about real estate, about buildings, about building which are symbols of development, is there a way to address risks in the sector, or is there a way to reduce cost of money for whatever is green built environment?
Thanks, Ruba. So that's a very loaded question, but let me just take a step back and come at it. Something that you said and what Sir also said. Actually, if you look at the differential between the cost of construction of a non-green building versus a green building, the cost differential is not massive. At times, the cost differential is nil, and Sir can tell what the reality is, but research tells us that the differentials are not always huge or massive, what we expect them to be. So it's possibly not a function of the cost differential alone. The differential comes, or the differences that arise are because of perceptions, are because of additional certifications that are required, the at times availability of materials which will be classified as sustainable or green. Now why am I getting into these details? Because when we talk about finance, finance wants returns commensurate to the risk that it's taking. And when it is unable to price that risk accordingly, when it is unable to identify how to price that risk accordingly, the returns are always going to have a mismatch with what the developer expects versus what the financier expects. A classic example is a green bond issuance. Both sides want a discount. The one who issues the bond also wants a discount. The one who subscribes to it also wants a discount. That possibly cannot happen. There has to be somebody has to pay for it. And because we are short-termism, who is paying for it is the unclear part. The role of the government does come into play because, like you said, 70% of the environment is yet to be built. And it's not just about 70% is yet to be built. India has to progress, which means that for anything and everything, finance has to go. So to question on cost of capital, just on domestic capital, I'm not even getting into the international where forex risk and sovereign risk will come into play, but just on domestic capital, financiers don't see any additional advantage in giving a discount. However, there are opportunities. As simple as a State Bank of India saying, I will give an X basis point lower if you are able to do an additional green measure in your property. It's a small example, but that's an opportunity which is not always looked at by financiers because it's not their bread and butter. What can change this paradigm? One, clear guidance on taxonomy, because the political back and forth at times also causes a friction or causes a delay in the finance coming. So a taxonomy which is on its way should help. Second is ability to price that risk or measure that risk first, which means that your risk, both your credit rating agencies and your internal risk evaluation systems will have to evolve to be able to measure something what is as simple as emission intensity of a project, which we have worked on, and Dhruva and we've worked on that, but the reality is the market's not ready to accept that, not yet. But that is a lever that needs to change. The third is regulation, and the regulation is not in form of giving a subsidy or a discounted rate or reducing the capital requirement, but rather in saying what they did for the infrastructure sector in 2011 and saying, these are the sectors we identify, so this is what the regulators identify as green, in line with what the taxonomy has defined. And the third is the market, the willingness and the ability to realize that if they invest in green, long term it is better for them, whereas in the short term it may not always lead to a positive return, quote unquote, the way returns are currently defined. So policy levers, regulation and market.
No, thanks, quite comprehensive, Neha. Just getting back onto, we'll come back on another round on finance, but coming back to law, Rachika now. Law is critical, at the end of the day, it's all about law getting into implementation of whether it is regulation which is then implemented for any built environment, whether you look at residential, commercial, or any other infrastructure development. While is the Indian legal system keeping pace with making built environment green? Yeah, I know we discussed a lot of transactions happening. Or is there a need for the legal system to even evolve further and would that be an incentive for a low carbon future of built environment? I mean, just open question, but feel free to
Sure.
kind of chime in.
So Dhruva, if you let a lawyer speak, then the lawyer can probably, speak endlessly. But, but I'll try and keep it limited to the time. So if we talk about Indian legal system, let me try and split it for all of us. One is obviously law and regulations. Second is the lawyers. And third is the judicial system, right? So, so obviously the technology is evolving. There are newer kinds of ways in which people are trying to reach the net zero decarbonization, targets that everybody has. A lot of corporates not only try and meet the targets that the regulations have set out for us, but also they have some international targets because we have so many multinational companies in India. For example, Amazon has reached its 100% renewable energy target. There are other corporations as well which are aiming at that. We recently did a captive power project for Henkel, which is, and for them also, the eventual target is to reach 100% renewable energy company because they're themselves a chemical company. So for them, it's very, very important that, so it becomes multifaceted thing for these corporations because they want to, obviously it's a brand recognition today. When you say that, oh, I'm doing 100% RE, I'm completely net zero, there is no scope 3 emissions. No, I think scope 3 will be difficult to achieve today, but scope 1 at least is. And so it becomes that. Obviously, it also, I think if you look at the tariffs, the way tariffs are going, if you set up captive power projects, eventually people have realized, like Neha was also saying, that when you do it, you realize that you're not expending more. You might be actually making more money, or saving some expenditure when you're setting up these projects by yourself. So, so I think on regulations, and probably with the help of all the not-for-profit organizations like Greha, Terry, and everybody who's trying to help government draft these policies, engaging with them very regularly. We lawyers also try and do our bit in terms of engaging with the government and tell them that this is practically possible because we engage with everybody in the spectrum, from transmission companies to generating companies to discoms. We engage with to private equity investors to lenders. So being engaging with all of these stakeholders in the sector, it becomes very, we get to know the practical aspects of issues, and therefore we also try and engage with the government to tell them what is practically possible, what is not possible. And I think government is, in terms of making the regulations and policies and giving incentives, is trying to keep pace. And that's why I say keep pace, because technology is moving really fast, and I don't think we are there yet. A lot of things where we see other jurisdictions are much ahead of us, where we are not. For example, VPPA is one thing. Even on doing IST, we were talking about ISTS projects right before this session, and I think on that as well, we are lacking behind on various things. Then obviously as lawyers, we try and catch up with whatever's happened, and we engage a lot with all the stakeholders, try and understand technology to the extent we can with our limited understanding of science, and try and do the projects for people. And as judicial system, we'll see that all of these forums where these kind of matters go to, disputes go to, all of them have technical members also, and the judicial members try and understand the technology before they are giving their understanding of what the case is and how it should be maneuvered. They try and engage with people who understand the sector before they come up with a judicial pronouncement. So, so I think the legal system is trying to do its best, and of course, it's all about engaging with all the stakeholders to make sure that we're there.
No, thanks. Thanks. I'll come back to you, Rachika, with a few more focused law, green tribunal, and green in law questions in the second round. But let me just complete this and go over to Sandeep. Sandeep, from a real estate development point of view, I know there are some questions which the organizers had shared, but coming back, how does the real estate sector look at this problem at the first place? So can you enlighten us on saying, is the real estate or the developer fraternity really concerned or getting into green buildings, getting into accepting these standards? Is it left to the market? Is it priced to the customer? What's with your company, and otherwise too, feel free. Yeah.
Uh, so first I will talk about myself, and then about general as a real estate developers. तो पहला तो जनरली मैं मेरा इंट्रोडक्शन जब बहुत जगह देता हूँ तो बिल्डर बोलता है तो जनरल लोगों के ऊपर जो एक्सप्रेशंस रहते हैं वो तो सबको आता ही है, और स्पेशली विथ अस हम बोलते हैं हम तो चूना लगाने वाले बिल्डर हैं. एंड वर्ड लिटरली मीन्स मैं चूना लगाता हूँ. So that's the journey of last 12 to 15 years. Again, coming back to low carbon future as such, the lime is the only material which has that capacity of absorbing carbon dioxide, being a chemical formula CaOH2, calcium hydroxide, which takes CO2 and becomes CaCO3, calcium carbonate. So as a builder, we have tried to reduce our carbon footprint by replacing cement wherever possible with the lime. So we have bricks made from a lime, we have mortar of a lime, we have plaster made of a lime, we have paints made up of a lime, and that way I am able to reduce my carbon footprint more than 50% of our project. So that we have achieved in last, say 10 to 15 years. So that's one part of a journey when I talk about what we are doing. And so we also do lots of other things to make not only carbon neutral, but one of our projects now we have already aimed to be a carbon positive. So for example, there's a township having more than 40 lakh square foot of area, built area, having carbon footprint of more than 1,60,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. We have planted more than 2 lakh trees in the last 7 years. Now they are standing and grown more than 8 years. Mortality rate is not even a 1%. So that way we have achieved, by only plantation of a trees, the carbon positiveness. And plus much more than that, we also have a benchmark sort of a renewable energy when it comes to use of renewable energy into the individual apartment. So we have all apartments running on renewable energy. So let it be light, fan, TV, computer of each and every apartment, to lift, to pumping, to a common lighting. So that way we have achieved more than 70% of renewable energy as the total energy ratio of, if you see, the energy requirement. So these are what we have achieved till date, and aims to be much ahead of the target when in terms of a low carbon future. So that's for us as such. And coming back to a builder's fraternity, that's much more than talk about. Especially now Maharashtra, I come from Pune. So we have now a new unified DC regulations coming into picture, and now government has offered more FSI for going green. So for 5% or a 7% of more FSI, and that becomes that has started, especially where the price of apartments are more. So for example, Koregaon Park area or heart of the city, where there are lots of redevelopment project happening, and then because of this 5% or 7% incremental FSI of going green for either 5-star rated or a platinum rated, now some of the builders have started shifting towards and looking for a green building as the option. Also now that is making age when that is given presentation to for example, society where people are already staying and they want to go for a redevelopment. So lots of customers, those who are staying, they slightly give inclination towards the builder who wants to do a green building.
No, thanks. Very important points. I'll come back to you again on the cement being green, because in a producing cement, you'll have to, there's no other way to liberate carbon dioxide any which way, because CaCO3.
We'll talk definitely.
We can talk about that, but unless cement is probably replaced from the existing one and different materials are made. But coming back and moving out from basic chemistry to architecture, not architecture right now, but first to carbon markets. So here is carbon credits getting created,
at just beside me in terms of integrated carbon markets, national, both compliance and voluntary. And you have on your side Archit Batra on FCF trying to develop carbon projects and also sort of look at what is the potential here. Is there some light you can throw? Feel free to talk in terms of what you think as best, but is there some light to throw on the real estate sector or thinking of built environment and sort of voluntary carbon projects over there? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. A very valid question, actually. So, working on the carbon markets, and as Mr. Saurabh was rightly saying, first of all, I think the whole point of Indian carbon markets being developed, it's a very welcome scenario within the whole carbon project development phase, especially because whatever issues he was highlighting, especially on the cost front of certifications for that matter. And as FCF India, since we work more on the rural aspect, more with the rural communities, those costs do create a lot of impact. Like just before this panel, I was having a discussion with Mr. Sandeep on the cost of credit. Like, and everybody talks about it, right? Like everybody, when we are out there, everybody would talk, like what is the cost of one carbon credit? Like, it's not standardized. That's the point. It's not standardized right now because of there are
I
multiple.
assume you're talking of price at which you can be
Yeah,
sold,
the price
right?
at which it can be sold. So it's not standardized because every project comes with its own costs. The cost of one fair carbon credit would be different for every project. Now, looking at the real estate sector for that matter, or the infrastructure sector for that matter, we are currently working on a few electric mobility projects, sustainable mobility, how that is shaping. Again, that's a big part of infrastructure right now. And we have been able to issue carbon credits in it, like we have been the pioneers for that. Now, a main component of any carbon project is additionality to it. And additionality comes with regulatory surplus is a term that we usually use for it. The policies that are there in a country, that whether a country is supporting such initiatives or this particular initiative is coming out of just pure intent. Like you might not have finances for it, but you're just doing it because you want to do it. It is a low carbon initiative. In these scenarios, a lot of thing about real estate is that the policies are covering a lot of aspect. Policies in general in the country are, I won't say like again, there is definitely a long-term vision to it. There is still short-termism to it. But the policies as of now, especially in terms of real estate, they are supporting a lot. So once we move to the carbon financing aspect of it, a lot of projects probably cannot be considered as carbon projects because usually they are going in business as usual scenario. That let's say if we want to implement more RE, if we want to get better designs, all of these things are some way or the other covered in policies or in fact even in subsidies. So why would carbon financing be required for it? There is that challenge which is coming in the carbon space especially. So till the time we are not able to justify why we require financing for it, at least carbon as finance might not come in the picture. But overall, if we look at other concessional funds, other ways of funding real estate or such infrastructure within the rural spaces, that is something which is definitely welcomed. Public policy making would definitely be more possible or it is more applicable in these areas than carbon financing in its current state. Till the time there is no standardization or a lot of organization within this space, I think there is in general, there would be that lack of understanding and people might not be openly accepting carbon as a finance in the infrastructure space.
No, thanks. Just let me understand it better before I kind of go further from you, Mr. Batra. So you're basically saying, okay, one, additionality is important for
Right.
that project for it to be sort of carbon financed,
Absolutely.
or there can be. And at the same time, you're saying it's difficult to justify that additionality as to, and therefore the prospects that you see on the sort of real estate projects or having voluntary carbon markets support that greening is not really very clear, if
Absolutely.
I may get
Because
that right.
in a lot of ways, even for that matter, when we look at the Ujala scheme, these are the schemes which are providing a lot of incentives to the users
So
already.
you're going to other schemes also,
Yeah.
sticking to development and not, okay, that's about replacing fuels. and-
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
So the schemes, till the time these schemes are there to subsidize a lot of activity,
Right.
till then carbon financing might not come in the
Might
picture.
not have a role to play in
Yeah.
that, right?
Right.
I get it. Now, coming to probably the most important part, Zoeb, here is the design. So you know what? Whatever you design gets implemented. Whatever an architect designs gets implemented. So you're at the root, or you're the starting point of that design. And how is your fraternity now, designer, thinking about going green, going livable buildings, call them whatever? You know, the entire, I have a view. I mean, I live in Gurgaon. Gurgaon has been built what it should not have been at the first place. So if you look at, when I was in school, I never had glass coating up buildings. I had bricks all, and I looked at buildings that used to be made of bricks, and today buildings are just glass, right? I mean, I'm confused. I don't understand it technically like you do, but therefore, what I'm asking you is, does design need to completely transform itself? Does architecture need to change? Yeah, over to you.
Okay, so I'll start to firstly enlighten you about why Gurgaon is like that. Okay, so I think everybody is. Your way of perceiving it is perhaps different, I'll say. Even the buildings in the Gurgaon are designed by the architects. So it's not that. No, again, so I would like to have a difference of opinion over there. Uh, Gurgaon as a whole mass development, it's one of the fastest growing development across the country, I'll say. Pune, yes. Gurgaon is another one big example. Gurgaon has got multiple developers operating there. So to name DLF, AIPL, Whiteland, multiple organizations are there. And all the developers are hiring good educated architects along with good educated green building consultants as well. So yes, why the buildings are going to that high and they are all coated silver and all, coming on to that particular statement, catching it out from your discussion, the reason why is the land prices have gone high, the FAR availability over there, the development on which is possible to be done, that leads to that kind of a urban formulation and that kind of a volumetric space which we see there. But if we talk about still about in the Gurgaon space as well, like if we talk about Udyog Vihar or plotted development, they are still G+1, G+2, G+2.5, let's say, on an average level. So it's not that people are just building and not doing anything. As an architect, people do give a thought to the designs of the building, but yes, the developer, though I'm also from the developer community as well, so the developer has got their own perceptions, the way they perceive the project, how they want to place it in the market, position it. Those dynamics play a very important role while getting a design being developed through an architect as well. So it does, architects do give a thought to the design, and for sure sustainability is on a paramount important as a criteria for them.
No, thanks a lot. So this was provocative questioning on Gurgaon. Yes, architects, I do believe there is, surely give a thought to sustainability and green. But let me now, we have some time, let me go the other way around, and since you were there, I think I'm zeroing on for, even for Griha to come to, and I'm hearing this out, and maybe possibly one of the incentives, quote incentives for going green could be higher FSI, better FAR. I mean, that could be an incentive. I mean, I just want your comment on that, and maybe then we can go on to you, to also, you also mentioned about FAR, green, and so while green credit, etc., will come to that as mentioned, but FAR on green seems to be something which can be taken up as a potential proposal for incentives, right? What do you, particularly real estate development and architecture, think about it?
So, sir, nowadays, even a small plot developer gives a thought about going green, because this is now part of the commercial dynamics of any development. if we talk about any client comes to us, if suppose I'm working as an architect, he comes to us, sir, how much can we build? And if I do green, then how much can I build? So this thing is already there as a commercial dynamic part, finance
Right,
part is
okay.
already into it, and this is there at the inception of the design.
So this exists commercially, so we does not need further incentive, or am I getting you right?
No, we do need the incentive.
Incentive
and
for
it is,
that, okay.
And it is already pre-planned that yes,
Okay.
we will go green. We will get 0.1 FAR, 0.15 FAR in Gurgaon or 7% in Pune, or however.
Okay, that's
the
already
state
built
laws
in,
are.
thanks. So, yeah, let me bring in Sandeep into this. Yeah, your view, that gives some takeaways from this session which may be useful for Griya and Terry to kind of get to certain incentives on the session, and incentives on FSI, FAR on green. Is that?
So it cannot be the norm as
Cannot
such.
be the norm, okay.
Yeah, because there are lots of builders who has where the rates are not that lucrative. Building just for the sake of FAR is not economically viable. For example, in Pune, there are only, if you talk about the spread of a Pune, not even 10% or 20% of the projects will go for a green, for a higher FAR, because it's not viable. For example, if my selling rate is a 5,000 rupees or a 6,000 rupees per square foot, adding 7% and then incremental cost of going green is not zero, it's much more than that, because we work on a day-to-day basis. I spend almost 400 rupees per square foot for going 5-star rated green project or a 7-star that we do. It's not nil, it is much, at least 10 to 15% higher for going green. 5-star rating project, and that cost to work out, and again going top of that, incrementing your steel, cement, everything, versus the sale rate, and versus the 7% increment in FSI may not be valid for everywhere.
No, yeah, sure. I'm not talking commercially. When I mean incentives, I'm saying, is there a subsidy? There's a case for subsidy here to make such projects commercially viable. When we talk of incentives, I'm saying, is FAR can be the parameter on which the government could think of subsidy?
Yes,
could
definitely, it's one
That's
of
the
them.
question. That's one of the approaches. No, I understand your point in terms of cost, and commercially, it does make sense, and at the same time, if supplemented more, maybe
There
another
was
way
another
to.
mechanism
Yeah.
earlier, before this
Yeah.
came into picture.
Yeah.
When I started working on green building, first time, say in about 2008, we worked with STPI. There was in Pune University and STPI, they were giving 5-star rating. And when builder was when we were passing the plan, the Pune Corporation gave us 25% discount in all the development charges we pay to the commission, PMC. So that was again one good initiative. When you just submit, you get the plan pass at that time 25% if it is a 5-star rated project. And when it is completed, rest 25% is again given. So that was one initiative long back, I availed it. Then second initiative was again by PCMC, where I did another my project, which is a final 5-star rated project. I got almost 50% of development charges we pay to PCMC, and it was a huge amount. For getting from a government check of 2.5 crore as back for a green building, 5-star building. That was a big achievement.
Sure.
So this way also can be, but now they have stopped coming into unified DC regulation, and it's only the FSI has become the norm. That should not be.
Okay, got your points. Thank you. Archit, any thoughts, any second order thoughts on saying how do you make voluntary carbon markets and projects work on buildings?
Sure. So it's not that the voluntary markets don't support any such projects. The methodologies exist. It's
Oh, that's an important thing.
yeah,
Methodologies
the
exist.
methodologies definitely exist, and the main thing is definitely coming down to the cost of it. So are we getting enough credits out of a particular building? And let's say both of these brilliant guys, they built some great building.
Right.
And they invest a lot of money into it, making it sustainable, probably developing certain carbon sequestration properties to the building that for the next 30 years. Carbon dioxide will be absorbed by the building. Even in that case, if we are not getting great numbers out there in terms of the number of credits, the market will, like, it will not be sustainable or feasible for them in the longer run. Reason being, we need to understand that do we have the demand for such credits? And demand for such credits would lie mainly on the aspect of, are there enough infrastructure firms across the world who want to go net zero, who have those bigger targets and who would want to purchase such credits from?
Right, okay. Who have the pressures to go net zero and they have to buy that. Get your point, thank you. Now coming to law. Coming to law now. The question for Rachika is the issue of saying, do we need a legal, so one is, the other side, the session is on incentives, right? The incentives is, you're providing some financial or non-financial incentives to make it happen. But when I look at incentive, the other side of incentive is actually penalties, right? That's bringing law to penalize if something doesn't happen, doesn't work. Do you see a potential there to make the built environment going ahead more greener, more compliant, more sustainable? Is there a role for law and beyond law onto regulation, implementation, penalties, whatever the case may be?
So I think we are at a stage as an economy where I think penalties will be a little harsh, because what we are trying to do right now is to encourage people to do more and more of renewable energy and decarbonization efforts. So I think incentives would play a major role, and which has been the case. Electricity Act came somewhere in 2003. After that, obviously, once the renewable energy push started happening, there were incentives for various players to come into India. We've been representing a lot of private equity players who've invested in India and made a lot of profits. So basically, initially there were higher incentives for setting up these projects. Now that the push has already happened, it's automatically just happening. People are still putting in money. If you see, maybe in 2014-15, the tariffs were 6 rupees per unit. Today it's fallen to 2.40 per unit. All of that's happening because, but still, you see so much investment coming into the country from across the jurisdictions only because that push has already happened. Earlier there were generation-based incentives, higher tariffs that DISCOMs had to pay, and DISCOMs had to buy the power if you've commissioned within a control period which offered that tariff. Those things happened, and now the renewable energy sector is on a roll by itself. So similarly, obviously, there are newer aspects to this which are coming, which is green buildings, which is EVs, which is green hydrogen, and so on and so forth, which I think would also get that push only by way of incentives, not maybe as penalty at the moment, yeah.
Thanks, thanks, I get the point. So incentives are more important than trying to kind of put standards and penalties in place. Okay, sure. Yeah, and I would kind of tend to agree with you. Now coming to money, finance, yeah, price according to risk. Well, the whole question here is, if you keep pricing according to risk, real estate will remain, built environment will remain a high risk sector. So is there a case for the regulator to actually reduce the risk weights for real estate sector or subsidize the risk for a real estate sector? Because built environment is, so if you continue risk-based pricing, then you're like it's not intersecting anywhere. So how do you build a case for incentives for the regulator and the policy maker to actually reduce the price of money or the cost of money to the real estate sector? Yes, across the board. And chuna nahi laga ke to the real estate sector.
Okay. I would tend to not veer towards giving incentives. Not disagreeing with what she said, but not a reduced risk weight. The reason for that is, when we're talking green, when we're talking sustainability, we have to take a holistic approach to it. Because if you give an incentive today on green buildings, tomorrow the next sector will come up and say, I want that incentive. then the sector after that will say, I want that incentive. Every sector needs that infusion. Every sector needs the inflow of finance to happen. What we possibly need is a revision in the way we evaluate risk. Rather than trying to say that risk is status quo, I think we need to go back to the drawing board and say, how do you evaluate, how do you assign that risk? What are the factors which contribute to that risk? Because changing the risk weight, it's sort of like saying, I'm treating the symptoms and not the problem. You need to treat the root cause and not the symptom that is being seen.
Risk weight is one part of it. I meant both risk weight and price.
Again,
They're two
because
different
they're
parts.
connected.
They're connected, yeah.
At the end of the day, the financial sector is going to price basis the risk evaluation. They're going to assign capital basis the credit ratings that are assigned, at least in India. Again, the heart of the problem is how do you evaluate risk? And to what everyone has said here, there are challenges, right? But these are challenges that are not absorbed by the people where the models are being built. So go back and relook at how you look at risk. Are emissions risky? Yes. Are they factored into the frameworks currently? Not really. That is the heart of the problem. So.
No, thanks. I get the point, and I also understand that money finance has been the heart of all evil for the last thousands of years in the world. In any way, the banker has been the biggest criminal for all changes that have happened in the world any which way, whether it's the global financial crisis of 2007. So we'll have to live with that. Like, finance will be finance, the banker will be greedy, the banker will make money, but within that point is what we have to drive society. So that's a different combination, but the banker will remain the banker. So that is one. Now, the last and final word, Mr. Saurav Diddi, to you, because you are at the head of an institution today which has the potential to make this transformation, has the potential to change the built environment, at least the energy efficiency, and possibly also now to a certain extent carbon emissions. So your closing thoughts and the final word to you.
First of all, I'm very happy that somebody said this, apart from us, that incentive is not the right thing. Maybe I'm the only person I felt, no, not as an enforcer, I'm saying, but as a personally speaking, I always feel that incentive is the worst thing. Whenever you will remove any kind of incentive, that scheme will fall flat. It will not work. So I'm very happy that she said that incentive is not the right approach. Even when we are talking about incentive, let's say, what our friend from architect and the developer, they said from their own perspective that FAR, FSI should be increased. But what is the negative impact of that? We have to look into. Griha can give those numbers that whether it has a real impact, whether your green building remains green with higher FSI or FAR. So we have to think from the different perspective that who is going to use that building. And if that incentive should go, it should go to the user of the building rather than developer. Now, you will not agree, but the thing is that if you will make a registration cost cheaper, for example, 0.5% or 1% registration cost cheaper, then probably still there will be a lease kind of things, but still things can go in different direction. And if people will demand, and star rating, for example, the appliances program is successful because people demanded for the energy efficient appliances. It is not because of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency or any other thing. People had the trust in the star rating and people demanded for that. So that kind of trust and demand should come from the people. And another thing which I wanted to add here, the way our climate is changing, our narrative should go away from the incentives, rather than we should say that we have to do it at any cost. Otherwise, we'll not see the future.
Which is enforcement, right? So you're basically saying
I'm saying not enforcement, that
But yeah,
people
since we
should
have
say
to do it,
on their own.
Right, so that social values changing. That's precisely what I started with, that the demand for green buildings, as you say, the client demands.
Now, the whole point is green cars, let's say EVs. There is an incentive for people. In some way or the other, there is incentives which are there for the OEMs, for the consumer. And that's exactly what you're basically saying, that to a certain extent here also that demand needs to come out of, because it's an imperative. You do not exist without that, because that is, you have to do it. That is what you would. As a next step, you have to do that. Yeah. So incentives versus have to do that. I really can't come to a conclusion here. So it's both incentives and have to do. We'll have to sort of end here this interesting session. Few minutes on, but I would like anybody to feel free to have a last word on this session on incentives or built environment incentives driving a green, low carbon future. Please, yeah.
There was a
We have 2
scheme by
minutes.
SBI you talked about. 0.25% rate of interest they were giving less for going green apartment if you're purchasing. So we started marketing of our project based on SBI will be giving 0.25% less in a home loan. And one day SBI withdraw the scheme. And till date, there is no other bankers who has come with such kind of a scheme.
Okay. So basically, you're indirectly what you're alluding to, that have financing products for green buildings, which are in some way lower price than what would otherwise be available for the homeowner.
Unpredictability of the institutions.
Yeah, so you reduce the unpredictability, but the unpredictability can be reduced. You can't get one bank to continue necessarily, so you'll have to build it into the overall system. Yeah. Anybody else? Thanks a lot. Important point.
And there is one more.
Yeah, sure.
Apart from this, as Saurabh ji has said, what we did is, so there are regular per square foot cost of apartment, and then we charge as a green contribution of a 300 rupees per square foot from our customers, which is a 5% incremental cost of going green. I have built 700 apartment with this kind of pricing, which I give regular to the customer, and not a single customer has ever asked about why 300 rupees more. Everybody loves to give 300 rupees more.
Right, that's great. That's a great note to end this session on, that there is consumer awareness and consumer wanting to shift. And thank you all very much. Thank you for an interesting session. Great to have all your perspective. And thank you organizers for Terry, Griya, Council for having this session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think we have time for a few questions. If, few audience questions.
Happy to take it as long as you have that time.
Yes, yes.
Sure. Yeah. Please. Yeah. Keep the question brief, and please address it to the person. Keep the question brief, and if you want somebody in the panel to address the question, please identify.
This is not a question, but a very short remark, and I'll keep it brief. This panel discussion was a bit disappointing. Largely, I would say the moderator, you use the word incentive perhaps more than 75 to 80 times. Sir, built environment is the largest contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions. And this city has choked now. This city is in a state of crisis. What incentive are we looking for? Why are we still talking incentives? We are in an emergency. Delhi is in a state of emergency, sir.
Absolutely agreed.
People are dying in this city.
Sure, but because
what incentive are you talking about?
What the session is?
No, sorry, sir.
Can I answer you the question?
No, sir. I think you kept repeating the word incentive. I think the time has gone for that. This is a state of crisis. Anybody who is not building green has to be barred from the business.
I would agree with you completely. The question is, why would anyone react to it? The whole point is, you may personally feel so, but I might not agree with you. You may think so, yes. For example, yes, but the real estate developer does not think so. The architect does not. He doesn't have a business case. He doesn't have a business model. He doesn't make enough money by building green. So, by your thinking, the world doesn't change. Unfortunately, it has to be I talked incentives and I talked enforcement too. So you will have to incentivize him on money, on return on capital invested. Only then will Orange County make that investment in green. If he does not make that money, I'm sorry, it will not happen. Even if you think so. Even if the entire Delhi thinks so, it will not. Because he doesn't get his adequate return on capital. Finance, the bank does not expect a real estate developer to return the money, so bank will not lend. He will not invest money because he doesn't make money. You may think it, but unfortunately your thinking is right, but it will not be acted upon. Thank you. Let's close the session.
Thank you, our audience. Before we conclude our session, I would please ask our panelists to come forward for a group photo. And I will also request Ms. Shabnam Basi, our Deputy CEO and Director at TERI and Griha Council, to please join us on the dais. I urge all our audience to be seated and join us for another insightful session, Transforming Urban Infrastructure, Building for Tomorrow, rightly after the session. Can we please have a round of applause as Ms. Basi facilitates our guests and panelists? Let's have the applause going, come on.